Neal Gaiman writes all of his first drafts in a journal with a fountain pen. Stephen King wrote all 896 pages of Dreamcatcher by hand. Quentin Tarantino still drafts his screenplays on paper, and the most recommended book on creativity in the world makes handwriting the cornerstone of artistic practice. In an age of lightning-fast keyboards and AI tools, why are some of the most successful writers in the world going back to pen and paper? Hey, I'm Sam Mass. I'm a writer and filmmaker, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the creative and cognitive benefits of writing by hand. We'll start by looking at why digital tools might be dulling your focus and weakening your writing. Then we'll take a look at how writing in longhand can spark creativity, deepen your ideas, and lead to better writing. And finally, we'll take a look at some famous authors and how they incorporate it into their routines and what benefits they get from it. When you open your laptop, what is the first thing you do? Check your email, open YouTube, glance at the news, maybe you open Substack. Every time I open the computer, I open a browser, I type Y, and YouTube is instantly pulled up, and I immediately find myself scrolling for a new video. But it's not really distraction. I'm not procrastinating. It's just a habit. Here's what's happening. My brain builds up these associations over time. It's what's called a cue, routine, reward loop. The cue is opening my laptop. The routine is opening a new browser, pressing Y, and opening YouTube. The reward is going on YouTube and finding that Bo Miles has posted a new video. This happens even when I open my laptop with the intention of writing, with trying to go to Google Docs. And it's simply because watching a video is more rewarding to your brain through the dopamine experience of it than doing something difficult. This isn't a problem for everyone, and it's not a problem all the time. For instance, I can write on the computer no problem first thing in the morning, but after 11 a.m., it's impossible for me to be on the laptop without finding myself being pulled in all these different directions. So instead of fighting it, I work around it. I grab a legal pad, I grab a pen, I sit somewhere quiet, away from the screens, away from my phone, and that's how I write in the afternoons. There's no apps, there's no inbox, there's no endless scroll, there's no notifications. It's what I like to call cue silence, because all of the cues of my bad behaviors of getting on YouTube or Instagram, those are wiped away. And that silence is what I need to focus and be creative. So it's not about being anti-tech. It's not about saying that being on the computer all the time is bad. It's just about setting up this environment in which it's easy for me to be creative. Okay, so as you'll see in the next section, when we talk about famous authors, there are a lot of reasons why someone might choose to write long form. I want to quickly touch on the 5 biggest benefits that I have gotten since I've started doing this practice. So number 1, we already talked about number 1, it's breaking the habit loop. So ditching the screen helps me sidestep those habits that I built up over time, like checking YouTube or checking Substack, and step into a more focused and intentional space. The next one I want to touch on is the meta story that is created when you write by hand. I love notes. I love taking notes. I love writing in the margins of books and scribbling all over the pages of first drafts. And the reason I love it is that there is a story that is created when you do that. To me, having these handwritten notes is sort of like having an archaeological dig site of thoughts and words of my past self. When you type, right, everything looks the same. Every letter looks the same. If you delete something, it's gone forever. But handwriting creates a story that is layered on top of the actual thing you're writing. You can see at a glance, the sections where you were rushing. You can see the moments of doubt where you doubted yourself, you crossed something out. You can see what ideas were an afterthought with an arrow drawn back to an earlier section or an idea written in the margin. So you can see how your ideas and how this story actually unfolded. And I think that's really cool. And I think it can also be useful because you can actually see what you tried before, what didn't work, what did work, and how you got somewhere. And on top of that, it's engaging. Writing by hand helps me feel more grounded in the process, which brings me to my next point. It's funny, when I started writing long form again, my biggest complaint was that it was too slow and I couldn't go fast enough and I couldn't keep up with my train of thought. In other areas of my life, I was trying to slow down and be more present. And I realized that writing was the perfect place to practice this. If I can't keep up with my train of thought, I need to learn how to slow down my train of thought and be more deliberate. And then the writing process itself changed because on a keyboard, I was often rushing, trying to get to the end. And when I write by hand and I'm slowing down, it becomes much more about the process and staying focused and staying in the moment. And it makes it more peaceful and calming. Whereas sometimes on the keyboard, I feel like the writing felt like work. Now it feels like something I want to do. I look forward to doing it. It centers me. Writing by hand makes me feel more satisfied at the end of every writing session. I get to see the pages stack up each day. And as they grow, it builds this momentum that keeps me going. It makes it easier to keep going. And when I leave the pages out, it actually creates a physical cue in my environment. Seeing the stacks of pages on my desk makes me want to sit down and write more. It's encouraging. It has its own momentum to it. The last point I want to make is how writing by hand has improved the quality of my writing by forcing me to sit down and edit differently than I do on a computer. Because it forces me to read each line carefully and type it up word for word and stay focused on what I'm typing. It's a very linear process. When I'm on a computer and I'm editing, I find myself jumping around a lot because it's easy to scroll, it's easy to scan through the text, and I kind of get lost in that process. When I'm doing it through paper, I have to follow the story chronologically to type it up, and I found that this leads to a much better second draft than if I do the editing on the computer. All right, so those are the main benefits that I've experienced. Now let's take a look at some famous authors, starting with Neal Gaiman. I'm just gonna pull up the video. So Neal Gaiman was on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and this is what he had to say about writing by hand.
I will do my first draft in fountain pen, because I actually enjoy the process of writing with a fountain pen. I like filling a fountain pen. I like uncapping it. I like the weight of it in my hand. I like that thing. So I'll have a notebook, I'll have a fountain pen, and I'll write. If I'm doing anything long, if I'm working on a novel, for example, I will always have 2 fountain pens on the go, at least, with 2 different colored inks, at least. Because that way I can see at a glance how much work I did that day. I can just look down and go, look at that, 5 pages in brown. I wrote that. Half a page in black. That was not a good day. And you can just sort of get a sense of, okay, are you working? Are you making forward progress? What's actually happening?
If you don't write longhand at all right now, one of the big things that I think will surprise you is how fun just the little tinkering and the finding the tools you like and the process you like he's saying with, using different pens. That's all really fun in a way that I think adults underestimate, but it makes you feel like a little kid and you get to make the process your own and you get to figure out what you like and dislike. And then you take this deep satisfaction in these weird little things like filling your fountain pen.
And I also love that because it emphasizes for me that nobody is ever meant to read your first draft. Your first draft can go way off the rails. Nobody ever needs to know anything that happens in your first draft.
That's why I love so much writing on legal pads. It's so easy to be messy. They're yellow. They don't look like anything you would ever publish anything on. Whereas on the computer, right? Like you read articles on the computer, it looks the same as the draft you have in your Google Docs.
But making rules, the importance of making rules. Rules like you can sit here and write or you can sit here and do nothing, but you can't sit here and do anything else.
That was always, and still is, when I go off to write. That's my biggest rule.
Could you speak to that?
Yeah, because I would go down to my lovely little gazebo, sit down, and I'm absolutely allowed not to do anything. I'm allowed to sit at my desk. I'm allowed to stare out at the world. I'm allowed to do anything I like, as long as it isn't anything. Not allowed to do a crossword, not allowed to read a book. All I'm allowed to do is absolutely nothing or write. And what I love about that is I'm giving myself permission to write or not write. But writing is actually more interesting than doing nothing after a while. And it's hard. As a writer, I'm distractible.
So this rule that he has of you can either do nothing or write is so much infinitely harder when you have a computer, which has infinite time wasting potential built into it. I mean, just think about how much time you waste on your phone or on a computer. If you're trying to do something difficult like write, you want to make it as easy as possible to stay focused on that task.
And then I'll sit down and type, and I'll put it onto a computer. And as far as I'm concerned, the second draft is where I try and make it look like I knew what I was doing all along. If I've written something on a computer and I decide to lose a chunk, it feels like I've lost work. If I delete a page and a half, I feel like there's a page and a half that just went away. And that's a page and a half's worth of work I've just lost. If I've been writing in a notebook and I'm typing it up and I can look at something and go, I don't need this page and a half, and I leave it out, I've just saved myself work. And it feels kind of like I'm treating myself.
All right, that was just a quick look at Neal Gaiman's process. Next, we're going to take a look at Quentin Tarantino, who writes his screenplays by hand, which is fascinating. If you know anything about screenplays, there's all these formatting rules that you have to follow. It's sort of like the difference between baking and cooking, whereas baking is screenwriting and you have to be much more deliberate in how you do it.
Do you write longhand still, or
Absolutely.
you do? Why? Am I trying to get it?
Wow. Creatively, you could pick better if you just have the pen in your hand.
That's exactly. Well, that's how I've always done it. I don't even know if I believe in God, but I do feel that my pen is my antenna to God as far as writing is concerned. When I wrote Reservoir Dogs, I wrote it out. Normally, when I'd written something before, I couldn't type. I would talk friends into typing things up for me. Well, I used my last friend, and fair enough. So, in that case, I wrote Reservoir Dogs longhand, and I had to type it up, and that's how I did Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards. But literally the whole process of me writing by hand, when I now have to type it up by one finger, and just literally, I don't trust it to hold anything from memory, so I print up every page as I finish.
Oh, wow, okay, good idea.
But it's that's an important part of the process to me. That's like that's the final draft coming out there. I mean, because I do tend to, I think people do, you tend to overwrite when you're writing by hand because it's just costs you nothing. It's just blah, 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 blah with the pen. But when you got to type it up with one finger, it's better be so that shit ain't motherfucking Shakespeare. It's got to go.
Typing stinks. The worst. Wow.
Basically the same sort of premise as Neal Gaiman, where typing is the work and you don't want to spend too much time typing, and then writing on a computer, like you touched on, it just feels too mechanical. It feels like the final draft, and that makes it harder to be messy and be yourself and try things. Whereas writing by hand, it's easier to just be playful. Another author who swears by it is J.K. Rowling. So J.K. Rowling wrote the early drafts of Harry Potter, often in cafes, scribbling on napkins, scraps of paper, whatever she had. Here's what she had to say.
Fanboy question about writing longhand or straight into the keypad. Do you still write things out into books?
No, but I do still love writing longhand into books. So I have tons of notebooks, and I write a lot of dialogue down. I handwrite a lot of dialogue. I write ideas down. I work out bits of plans by hand. It's such a prosaic reason for writing longhand, but to me it's important. You get to keep everything. The thing is with the computer, when it's deleted, you can't go back. You think, oh, damn it. Yeah. I know I planned a chapter there, and I know I think that would have worked better, and it's gone. But I've learned that just keep saving. So I've got, 52 versions of a plan. Just make sure you save it and go again. But the great thing, I love looking back over my old notebooks. It's a true record of where everything came from.
I always say to my students that it's good to build up a kind of archaeology of your work that you can look back on, even if it's just about seeing your mistakes, where you went wrong. Because, yeah, you're right, deleting everything just leads to this idea that something was perfected right from the beginning.
All right, and then next, let's take a look at Stephen King. Stephen King has to say, I've occasionally gone back to longhand because I wanted to see what would happen. It changed some things. Most of all, it would slow me down because it takes a long time. It made the rewriting process a lot more felicitous. It seemed to me that my first draft was more polished, just because it wasn't possible to go so fast. You can only drive your hand along at a certain speed. It felt like the difference between, say, rolling along in a powered scooter and actually hiking the countryside. Again, it's just getting back to that slowing down process. It's going to change the way that writing feels. And that's a great thing to do when you're stuck or you don't know what to do next. It's just try a different medium, because you never know what that might unlock, because it is different. It's not all just writing, period. So everybody has a different process for writing long form, and there's different benefits and reasons for doing it. Part of the reason why it's fun is because you get to unravel these things as you're doing it. You don't really know what's going to come, what benefits you might get, or how you're going to do it when you start. And then you slowly get to develop this process where you figure out what tools you like using, if you like writing with a fountain pen, or if you like scribbling on napkins or in a really nice notebook or on legal pads. All these things, it changes the experience, and it makes you feel kind of like a little kid again, where you're picking out what toys work for you and how you're going to use them to facilitate your imagination and creativity. So as you're building this into your own routine, you want to think about that. What tools are you going to start with? How do they make you feel? What's the experience like? It's going to take some forcing if you're not used to it. But if you want it to really stick, you want to think back to that cue, habit, reward loop from earlier, right? Setting up a specific time and place where you do it so that it triggers that habit as you go. There's a cue of pulling out your notebook when you're sat at your desk, or Maybe you go to a specific coffee shop to write and you only write long form when you're there. That'll help you get deeper into the experience. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like. It helps out a ton. Subscribe if you want more content like this that's centered around writing and creativity. I'll post a video every week. So until then, keep writing, keep creating, and I'll see you in the next video.